Okay, we are going live.
I would like to welcome everyone to the Reynoldsburg City Council meeting of February 8th, 2021. I am Council Pro Tem Kristen Bryant, filling in for President Jenkins this evening. This meeting is being live streamed with closed captioning on the City of Reynoldsburg government Facebook page. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? All right, seeing none, the agenda is approved as submitted. Next item is the approval of minutes. Approval of the City Council regular meeting minutes of January 25th, 2021. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to these minutes? All right, seeing none, the minutes stand as submitted. Community comments. Community comments portion of the meeting is an opportunity for citizens to address council to bring matters to the attention of the City Council. Comments related to tonight's public hearing may be made during that hearing period. Council President will invite speakers to be recognized and give their name and address. All remarks should be addressed to the council as a whole and not to exceed 3 minutes. Are there any comments from the community?
Yes, President Pro Tem, we have Miss Shantea, if you'd like to unmute and make your presentation to council, and then Mr. Benner, you will follow her.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shantea Fennessy. I am the owner of a Priceless Senior Care Home. It's a residential care home located here, right here in Reynoldsburg. A residential care home is basically assisted living in a home setting. So it's a lot smaller than the traditional, like larger assisted living facilities, but the same care is provided. And so I just wanted to introduce myself. We've been up and running for about 2 years now, and we're available to the community as a resource for assisted living or just as a senior advocate.
Well, welcome to Reynoldsburg, and thank you for introducing yourself. And Mr. Benner.
Thank you, President Pro Tem Bryant. How are you this evening?
I am well.
Good, good. I want to start out, I was remiss last week for not thanking City Attorney Shook for inviting the 2 attorneys that he had attend your work session on the what you guys are calling the source of income law. I thought both presentations were done very well. I thought they were, for the most part, factual and not a lot of hyperbole. My intention today, I have printed out the minutes of the last meeting, the minutes that you guys just approved. And I was going to go over Attorney Carly Boo's testimony presentation, but I've reached out to Carly and she's agreed to meet with me one-on-one so that we can go over things that I either didn't understand or may have a different thought about. And I appreciated that. I thought she gave a very nice presentation. We've agreed that we probably don't agree, but we can still discuss like civil people. So I'll skip that part of it. What I do want to make sure you're aware of, I've asked the Clerk of Council, Molly Prasher, and thank you, Molly, to provide each of you with the HAP contract that you're going to force landlords to enter into if you indeed pass this legislation. And if you will indulge me, I'd like to just point out a few things in that contract, not the least of which, and on the 4th page of the contract, section 2C, where it says the contract For the unit, it must include word for word all provisions of the Tennessee addendum required by HUD. Basically saying that my lease that I've used for over 15 years is no good. It's okay. I mean, I can fill one out and they can sign it, but this contract with the housing authority supersedes anything in my contract. And I'm hoping that council will indeed take a look at this, because, you know, it's one thing to say, well, this is a great idea because we're really going to help people. But I think you should know the ramifications of what you're asking other people to do. And those other people would be landlords like me. Do you know that PHA can terminate program assistance for the family at any time that they deem necessary? So I can rent to a person with a housing voucher, and 4 months later, if they do something that makes the public housing authority upset, they can terminate the contract. Now I've got another empty unit I've got to turn over. They can do it automatically. They can do it for whatever reason. They can do it if they run out of money. So if Congress would decide to cut funds, a new administration comes in, they can do it for that. They determine, you know, how much the payment is, which I think is interesting. This is big brother-ish. Page 6, paragraph 11. The owner must provide any information pertinent to the HAP contract that the PHA, the Public Housing Authority, or HUD may reasonably require, including access to computerized and other electronic records and to any computers, equipment, or facilities containing such records, and must provide any information or assistance needed to access those records. So it's just 4 little pieces of paper. That's what they told us. Just 4 little pieces of paper. It's not a big deal. Anybody ought to be able to do this. If you get away from the contract original or part B and go to part C, it will tell you right there that the language of this tenancy will control if there are any disputes or any discrepancies between my lease and theirs. Paragraph 5D, that's a good one. It says PHA failure to pay the housing assistance payment to the owner is not a violation of the lease.
Mr. Benner, your
Yes.
3 minutes are up.
God bless your heart, Molly. You know, I understand the rules and I'll shut up, but there were strangers from outside the city that were given more time than I've been given. I have talked to several members of council and one-on-one. I hope to talk to all of you, and I will hope that you'll look at this contract that you're going to force on people like me before you decide how to move forward with this legislation. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Benner. Do we have any other comments?
No, Madam President, I have no other comments or individuals wishing to speak.
Are there any comments from council? Mayor?
Of course, I will keep them very, very brief. As all of you know, on Wednesday on the 12 o'clock show with Mayor Joe, we're going to be going ahead and announcing what's going on with the Kmart location. And while council is very aware of everything, the community is very much looking forward to it. So I hope you're able to join in the discussions with that. We will have the president of someone coming to discuss it. I would also like to, again, formally extend in person my request for you to attend the virtual State of the City, which will be on February 25th at 7 p.m. and will be broadcast live on Facebook. And again, it's at 7 p.m. If you have questions about any of those items ahead of time, please let me know. I also wanted just to take a moment. Reynoldsburg suffered a loss in the community recently. And while losses happen on a continuous basis, this one is, just as tragic as many. We lost a young life of a former Raider football player, a graduate from 2017, Justice Landers. And just want to make sure that everybody knows that if you are feeling that you need to talk with someone, that you need help, there's always going to be somebody there for you, whether it be contacting information through the city, through your school district, counseling, things of that nature. Please know that you are you're going to be missed, and there's always going to be somebody there to help. I thank you for that indulgence, but it's just something that I know a lot of us have strong feelings towards. So with that, Madam President Pro Tem, back to you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Madam President Pro Tem,
Yes,
excuse me for interrupting. Before you moved on, I'd like to share a few words when it's appropriate.
go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to publicly thank Ms. Fenice for coming to council. I actually met her when I was on one of my ward walkabouts. And it's just refreshing that when we meet our neighbors in the community, that they have the same level of passion and energy that we do for the love of our city. And so I just wanted to thank her for coming to introduce herself. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lawson Rowe. I would encourage anyone that's coming into Reynoldsburg and bringing a business along with them to please make sure they step up and introduce themselves to us. Ideally, they've had some interaction with Mr. Boucher in City Hall, but nonetheless, it's good to get a public acknowledgement of a new business coming into the area. And I want to thank the mayor for his comments. The Reynoldsburg football family has been through a lot in the last about 16 months. This is a tragic third loss in that amount of time. And so, I tend to not speak on religion, but those of you who pray, I encourage you to pray for the family of Justice Landers and the Reynoldsburg extended football family, because this is a lot. And this has been a really difficult day or two. So, those who are so inclined, please be on the lookout for a GoFundMe for Justice Landers. And I encourage everyone to give what they can for that family. So on that cheery note, we're going to move on to the public hearing. There is a public hearing for an agricultural application this evening. Would the clerk please read the ordinance?
An ordinance to approve the application made by Maplewood Farms LTD to have certain land located within the city of Reynoldsburg, located on Summit Road, permanent parcel number 125-026616-00.000, designated for placement in an agricultural district. Madam President, there is no one here within council chambers to speak on this, and I don't believe, unless there is someone interested in speaking on this ordinance on Zoom. All of these are guests of the mayor. The remaining people are guests of the mayor.
Okay. So, if anyone would like to speak on this ordinance, please step up. And there are no comments. And as there are no comments, this public hearing is closed. Next item is communications. Do we have any additional communications?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Moving on to item 9, motions. First item is a motion to affirm the appointment of members to the Civilian Review Board. Mayor, do you care to speak?
Yes, thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. Just wanted to introduce you. You have their resumes and their cover letters to as many as who were able to attend this evening. But these are members that have been suggested and recommended by each ward representative, as well as my office, to be the inaugural members of the Reynoldsburg Civilian Police Review Commission. This was their first step. So again, you can see, kind of put a face to some of the names that are out there. They're not required to speak or say anything on their behalf, but I did want them to see you. Also wanted to kind of go through what the next steps in this process are. In the not too distant future, City Attorney Shook will be reaching out to them to do I don't want to call it a work session of sorts, to kind of go through the legislation, their particular roles in it, expand on it a little bit more so than what has already been done. And then speaking with Chief Baker and Deputy Chief, we have working on our Citizen Police Academy, which looks to get off the ground sometime in early to mid-March. So arrangements will be made for these individuals to join us at the Police Academy, which will include, again, things that were in the legislation, which includes some coursework within the class, a potential ride-along later in the future, COVID permitting, as well as perhaps some trip to the firing range, as well as a good Q&A session to kind of give everybody an understanding of what's there. Not all members are present this evening. I see a few of them are missing, but again, I wanted to make sure that they had the chance to see you as members of council and you had the opportunity to see them. The members that I spoke with, I said very bluntly that I hope I never have to meet with you. And it wasn't anything personal with any of them. I think they're all wonderful people. I just hope that if we're meeting with them, then that means something else is going on. And that's not what any of us expect from Reynoldsburg Police Department. However, this is a good step to continue our efforts to increase communication between all members of our community, as well as the transparency of any issues that may come up. So thank you again, Council, for providing this opportunity, and members of the Commission, thank you for indulging the lengthy amount of time it took to get to this point, and thank you as well. With that, I'll turn it back over to President Pro Tem Kristen Bryant.
Thank you, Mayor. Do we have any questions or comments from council?
Seven.
Yes, Councilmember Cotner.
Thank you. Just a very brief comment. I will, first of all, echo that hopefully this group never meets other than in the training and information gathering process. Hopefully this is again, that our Reynoldsburg Police Force maintains their fantastic efforts into the community. I continue to be amazed at all that they do outside of even law enforcement, but community relations, connecting and helping and serving. And I think we're very fortunate to have them. So I'm hopeful that this group only meets as they are gathering their expertise to move forward. With that being said, I appreciate all the resumes that were sent and passed along to council. And I wanted to thank each of you who agreed to serve in this capacity, and want to share with our community how fortunate we are to have each of you. The resumes that we were privileged to read speak volumes to the character and professionalism and knowledge that you all bring. So the city of Reynoldsburg is very well represented, and each of you dedicating this time and effort is really appreciated to continue to make them better and make our force better. But some very impressive people and impressive resumes, and I just wanted to thank you all for your time and effort to this. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. Do we have any other questions or comments from council?
I was just briefly say thank you for those who stepped up to be on this review board. I see some faces I do know and some I do not, but I just wanted to say thank you for agreeing to be on this panel.
Thank you, council member.
Yes, so I also would like to say thank you to everyone that stepped up to serve on this board. I do see a few faces out there that I know. This is about, you know, our community, right? And you are going to be representing our community for the fullest. And as many people have stated before, we don't want anything to happen. But this does set the presidency that we are going to that next level. And we're going to be, you know, working with Reynoldsburg Police Department because we do have some great officers that's there. But again, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who decided to throw their name out there to be a part of this because this is what it's about. It's about our community.
Thank you, council member. I see council member Pecoro.
Again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out and getting into this review board. And one of the best outcome which I envision is Citizen Police Academy. I think you being in the review board get a first opportunity to be part of Academy, and hope with your advice and with your involvement, we can continue this program and more people will be engaged and knowledgeable about how the police works. And that will be, I think, more expanding, and we as a community will get empowered in the long term, will achieve our goal. Thank you again for being part of this very important work.
Thank you, council member. Do we have? Yes, council member Lawson Rowe.
Yes, thank you in advance for your time. Thank you for offering your talents, and thank you for being a willing partner. And I look forward to all of the good learning that you all acquire in this partnership. Thank you.
Okay, just as a general comment, I would say I'd encourage anybody that wants to know more about how our police department works, to please reach out to them. I've had the opportunity to go on a ride along or 3, and I've always found them very informative, and gave me the opportunity to see things I wouldn't have seen otherwise. And I think that's a value. So, again, as COVID allows, I encourage all of you on the board, as well as those who might be watching tonight at home, to take opportunity to do that. So with that, do I have a motion to approve the appointment of the mayor's review board?
Motion.
So moved by Council Member Baker. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Council Member Lawson Rowe. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Nope, you can just
Nope.
do a
Oh,
unanimous vote.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Next up is a motion to approve a resolution to recognize Black History Month. Council Member Baker, would you please read the resolution?
Yes, thank you, Madam President Pro Tem. Since I got on council in 2018, I always thought the month of February should be recognized in the city of Reynoldsburg. And so each year I've always introduced a resolution to honor Black History Month, because like I've said in the past, and I'll say it tonight, that Black history is part of American history. And so we in the city of Reynoldsburg should recognize that this particular history is deeply ingrained in American history, and that we should celebrate all the achievements of those from the African American community who have done things, and not just in our country, throughout the world, to make it a better place. So, try to find the resolution. I do apologize. Excuse me. I had it up. Here it is. Okay. A resolution honoring Black History Month, February 2021. Whereas during National Black History Month, we celebrate the vast contributions of Black Americans in our nation, history, and identity. And whereas the origins of Black History Month date back to 1915, when Dr. Carter G. Woodson founded an organization known today as the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And whereas observing Black History Month provides opportunities to gain a deeper understanding of African American history and acknowledge the centuries of struggles for equality and freedom. And whereas every year the Association for the Study of African American Life and History sets the theme for Black History Month, and the theme for 2021 is the Black family representation, identity, and diversity. And whereas the year Black History Month theme explores the complexity and dynamic of African American families and their stories throughout history. And whereas the city of Reynoldsburg is deeply committed to equity and inclusion including cultural and racial affirmation of our residents and community members who identify as African Americans. Be it resolved by council of the city of Reynoldsburg that this council does hereby recognize and declare the month of February 2021 as Black History Month in the city of Reynoldsburg. And I would like to note that last year I wore my Negro League jersey that my brother had bought me for Christmas a few years ago. And I make it a tradition that every month, every day in the month of February, that at least wear it once, because it reminds me of the struggles, not just personal struggles, but struggles in the public eye that African Americans have gone through to be recognized as equal, not above, not below, but as equal as all Americans. And so I don't know if you can see it, it's the Washington Black Senators. But with that being said, does anybody else have anything they want to say before we vote on this resolution?
I'd like to say something.
Yes, Councilwoman Lawson Rowe.
Black history is so important, as you shared, Councilmember Baker, that Black history is American history, and it's important for America to see adequate representation of itself and its accomplishments. It's so important to highlight that our history did not begin with being enslaved. And so I just celebrate Black history, not only today, but every day. And here at Reynoldsburg, we have such a rich history, and dating as far back as the Underground Railroad. And I'm sure there's much more history that we have not uncovered because our history has not been written in history books. But and that is something that I've taken upon myself, is to do some research on the history of Black people in Reynoldsburg. So thank you so much for acknowledging this, and thank you for again sharing that Black history is American history.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve this resolution?
Council Pro Tem Bryant, I would like to make the motion.
Motion made by Councilmember Baker and seconded by
Seconded by Strickland.
Councilmember Strickland. Thank you very much. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to reports, we have the council year-end review. Does council have any comments?
Madam President, if I may advise our guests that they are more than welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting, but feel free to leave at any time.
You mean you don't want to stay for hours?
You know, they're welcome, more than welcome.
Thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. In regard to council year-end review, do we have any comments?
Yes,
Councilmember
I do.
Strickland.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you, Molly, for putting that together, right? That really gives us a holistic on how things are going. How was our first year in city council, and how are we going to progress, right? So I want to say thank you publicly. There's still a lot of work that needs to happen moving into 2021-22. So I look forward to working with my other council members here to move Reynoldsburg continually through the next phase here. But we did a lot for 2020 in a pandemic that we never thought would happen here. So I just want to say thank you to all the council members who introduced something, passed the legislation, because again, it's for the better good of our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Strickland. Do we have anyone else? Okay, I would just say that every day that you don't have a shovel in the ground is a day that you fall behind. And it's been a beautiful thing to see a number of shovels around town this year. While others might have been falling behind, I think we were pushing forward. So, thank you, Mayor, for all your hard work. Director Bowsher, everyone at City Hall for doing very difficult work under very difficult circumstances. And, everybody at City Hall that comes in, day out, the folks in the street department and over in Parks and Recs and all around town that are serving our residents. Thank you for being the workers that we could rely on. So, and we will move on to our Development, Parks and Recreation Committee meeting. I'm going to turn this over to Council Member Baker.
You are muted, Councilmember Baker.
Sorry, I muted myself so you didn't hear the kids screaming in the background. This is the Development, Park and Recreation Committee meeting for February 8th, 2021. Members in attendance are Councilmember Cotner, Councilmember Lawson Rowe, Councilmember Pacquiao, myself, and President Pro Tem Bryant. The first item on the agenda is an ordinance to waive the provisions of section 971.16 of the City of Reynoldsburg Codified Ordinance for 2021 for various Reynoldsburg Park and Recreation events. Director Bowman, would you like to speak on this?
Thank you, Chairman Baker and members of the committee, members of council. This legislation is asking for authorization to sell and consume alcohol at various city events such as the Farmers Market, the Tomato Festival, the Blues and Brews Fest, Artist and Makers Market. So we thought I spoke with Attorney Shook and Clerk Prasher, and they were agreed that we should put these all together so that I don't forget one and have to come to you at the last minute asking for something to get rushed through. And it does take time to get the permits. So we will apply for all necessary permits, work with the police department. Areas will be fenced off that will all be designated for all of these events. And if any questions that you have, I'd be happy to answer them.
Is there any questions from the committee for Director Bowman? Okay. Councilman Cotner?
Okay, thank you. New event listed in here, Blues and Brews event. Could you
Yes,
start
sir.
by sharing more on that, please?
Well, we're hoping to have it in October. Brews would be craft beers, hopefully beer trucks, different beer vendors and blues music. Still kind of in the works, but we are hoping to have that take place in October.
And the location of that would be? Is that-
Hopefully the Livingston House.
Okay. Okay. So anywhere that alcohol is sold, those specific areas would be enclosed that you can only consume in that area?
Correct.
Okay.
So we will have, so like for the Tomato Festival, all of Huber Park will have that fencing because you can walk the grounds at the Tomato Festival. When we do it for the Farmers Market, where you have the wine tasting, that's a very specific area. You can only be at that vendor's booth. If we go to the Livingston House for the Blues and Brews Festival, we would rope off an area. We even thought about maybe we would move it inside the house. That way it's confined inside those doors. So that was our thought process inside the summer kitchen area.
Wow.
Not 100% confirmed.
That one throws me quite a bit there. Okay. And walking the grounds of the Tomato Festival then now we're saying there is no beer tent. It's go where.
There's still a beer tent. It's the same thing we did in 2019, where you were allowed to buy your beer at the beer garden and you could walk the grounds with it as long as you stayed within the fenced area. So for the Tomato Festival in 2019, we, after the event and I walked Davidson Drive to pick up any trash, I picked up 2 beer cans. So everybody They stayed within the grounds. We had people at the gates. You were not allowed out with an open container. So it was very, very well managed.
Okay. Thank you for a few points of clarification.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman Strickland.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Baker. Were there any issues last year that we should be aware of when selling alcohol at these, several different locations that we need to, be concerned with for this
No,
year?
actually, knock on wood, in 2019, everything went beautifully. We had great help with the police department, great training from them. Our vendor at the farmer's market that we had with the wine sales was accommodated. She followed all of the rules because we do have to apply for the permits from the Department of Commerce. And if you're not in compliance with those, if they find, if they do an inspection, you can get it, you can get fined or in trouble for that. So everything went beautifully.
Wonderful. Now, just going back a little bit regarding the Livingston House, is it possible that we could set up those same parameters having to do with the fence at the Livingston location so we can confine that also and just making sure we are secure when, having individuals drink alcohol? Is that also a possibility?
Yes, and like I said, the locations are still to be determined. We're still working out the logistics. We could move it to Huber Park. We just haven't defined those just yet. So we're still working on those. But if we are at the Livingston House and we're serving alcohol, we can definitely have a confined area for that. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have a question. Now I know beer would also be wine, a little harder liquor, or is it just straight beer?
At the Tomato Festival?
Well, at all of them, but sure.
We're probably going to stick pretty much with beer and maybe some wine. I'm not sure we're ready to go into the spirits just yet.
Okay. Just thought I asked.
Well, the Tomato Festival, if we get the Bloody Mary bar, we would have that. And that would be done by a person who is experienced bartender making those pours.
Okay. Is there anybody else have any questions, whether it be from committee or council on this piece of legislation? Okay. Seeing none, I'll make the motion that we forward this ordinance on the council for its first reading. Do I have a second?
A second.
Second by Councilman Pacquiao. All those in favor, or any other discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No? Okay, ayes have it. This motion, this ordinance will be forwarded to council for its first reading. As there is no further business in front of the Development Park and Recreation Committee meeting, I return this back over to you, Madam President Pro Tem Bryant.
Thank you, Councilmember Baker. Next we have is our Public Safety Law and Courts Committee. Vice Chair, Councilmember Lawson Rowe. Are you ready?
I'm ready, ma'am.
Go for it.
This is the Public Safety Law and Courts Committee meeting for February 8th, 2021. Members in attendance are Councilmember Cotner, Councilmember Pacquiao, myself, and you, President Pro Tem Bryant. First is an ordinance to amend Chapter 503 of the Codified Ordinance of the City of Reynoldsburg to provide fair housing opportunities for individuals and their families regardless of the source of income to pay for such accommodations. This ordinance is being discussed as a work session only. Attorney Shook, would you like to provide comment on this legislation?
Sure. Thank you, Chairwoman Lawson Rowe. The legislation that's presented to you this evening is the same legislation that was presented for work session at the last meeting. Because this is such a significant change, and as we've heard from many speakers, some potential far-reaching impact, we have scheduled this for a second work session. Hopefully everybody on council has had an opportunity to digest all the information that was thrown at you at the last meeting. I'm sure Mr. Benner reached out to all of you. I, in fact, had a lengthy conversation with Mr. Benner on Saturday as well. And so at this work session, I think the intent here would be to decide if this is something that council wants to continue to pursue. And if so, if there are any changes that you would like to make before this would come back.
So are there any questions or comments from the committee? Yes, Councilwoman Strickland.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Lawson Rowe. First of all, again, thank you to Attorney Shook and everyone that had an opportunity to meet with those individuals. I believe it was Attorney Carly Booth and also Attorney Dimitri. I know last council meeting was very, very long, but I believe it was a healthy conversation for this ordinance and against the ordinance. I still strongly believe that we as a city have to be able to protect all members that's in our city. I am, for this ordinance to protect the veterans, to protect people who have, a set income, to give them the fair opportunity to raise their families here in Reynoldsburg, again, the city of the respect. So again, my ask would be to move this forward for a first read. But again, I appreciate everyone considering this ordinance.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the committee? Yes, President Pro Temp.
Yes, Attorney Shook, is there any discretion afforded to landlords in the event that they've got two people that show up and say, hey, I want that apartment. Person A's got a check to hand over and person B has a voucher?
That's a difficult situation. And, what we would typically apply in a discrimination context would be what's known as the McDonnell-Douglas test. And you as an attorney may know what that is, which is that generally if you have, let's say in the employment context, you have someone who's a member of a protected class applying for a position, and you have a member of a non-protected class applying for that same position. If the member of the non-protected class is hired, that can create what's known as a prima facie case of discrimination. In that situation, the employer then would have to articulate a legitimate business justification for having selected the non-protected class person. And then the burden then shifts over to the protected class person to establish somehow whether that business reason is a pretext for discrimination. That's the same type of burden shifting that's applied in discrimination litigation, not just in Ohio, but all across the country. And that is the same standard that we would likely apply in order to maintain consistency here. So in that situation, the landlord would need to articulate a legitimate non-discriminatory reason for having selected the non-voucher holder. I believe, as Attorney Hatzapatinos articulated at the last meeting, one of the best ways that a landlord can avoid that, and as he advises his clients, is to say, first come, first serve. I'm not even letting the potential for discrimination enter into my mind. First come, first serve. First applicant who can pay will be the applicant we select. And that is certainly a legitimate business reason to choose one applicant over another, and would be a way for landlords to be able to proceed in a non-discriminatory way. But I'm just trying to be as clear as possible here with counsel that those situations can be very difficult to try to differentiate between what is discrimination and what is not discrimination.
Okay. Thank you, counsel. We have questions or comments from anybody else?
Please.
Oh, sorry, went to my old headspace. Meredith, I got in your way. Go ahead.
Thank you, council member. Yes, council member Cotner, please.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name. We'll call him Attorney H, if that works Mr. Shook. His conversation 2 weeks ago shared that while he was in favor of vouchers, and he spoke that, you know, his clients were happy and willing to accept vouchers, then he quickly kind of turned and countered to the fact that they're happy with vouchers as long as they don't have to enter into a party with a third contract, which is exactly what you have to do in order to accept a voucher. So while I think the intent was to be a pro voucher commentary, it actually seemed more against the process and system, because it does require those landlords to enter into the contracts. So first of all, that my understanding and take on that is correct and clarifying kind of his discussion, because again, in a 3-hour meeting with multiple work sessions, I think there were multiple eyes glazed over at different times.
Sure. Yeah, so Attorney Hatzapatinos was actually invited to be a speaker in opposition to the ordinance itself. While he had indicated certainly at the meeting that he and his clients, which include not just landlords in the city, but also the Columbus Apartment Association and the Ohio Apartment Association, what he had indicated was that he would support the legislation as long as we carved out an exception that would not require any landlord to enter into a third-party contract with a governmental agency. He's essentially saying that he's against it without coming out and being overtly against it,
Right.
because if we did carve out that exception, it would essentially eliminate any protection against discrimination against voucher orders.
Right. So he's kind of saying, you know, yes, we want to include veterans benefits, Social Security benefits, you name it, but entering into that contract is going to be a problem for his clients. And so he has quite a few clients in the city, and the number will be growing more with the multifamily that we have. You know, one of my concerns is not so much for the large, you know, multifamily unit. They're big business. They're developing big business. They know how to handle themselves. I think a couple realities really are the potential that rents will go up in those situations, because businesses will always find a way to generate their revenue. And so I do worry of, you know, not only does that raise that rent on the tenant that would have a voucher, but it'll trickle over to the person that, you know, doesn't qualify for a voucher. And that is one potential that I think the rents may, while trying to help, may actually end up being raised in some senses. Reynoldsburg has very affordable rents, comparatively speaking. So for the other person from Bexley speaking, that they require acceptance of vouchers, you know, that voucher is not going to get you very far in the city of Bexley, where it will go quite a bit further in the city of Reynoldsburg. So we're kind of comparing apples and oranges there. And I think that's another point that we need to very carefully consider. And I wanted to ask Mr. Benner, and I didn't know that he would be off, but, you know, someone like him who is a Reynoldsburg resident, invested into the city quite heavily, you know, how many rentals he has, and, you know, people like him that are trying to provide a quality location, then forced into these contracts. You know, those are going to be issues that, what does it look like for them? You know, people that are providing something and trying to be a win-win. And my last, then, I guess, direct question that I would want to clarify, Mr. Shook, is can we as a local government mandate that a private entity, whether it be a, you know, someone like Mr. Benner who owns a handful of properties, or someone like a multifamily, you know, 3-5-story apartment complex, can we mandate to these businesses that they're required to enter into a third-party governmental contract?
The answer to, I didn't know if there was more than one question, but the
No,
answer to,
that was really it. I usually honestly try to kind of leave my questions open-ended to give you the latitude to elaborate. So if it sounded like I was going somewhere else with it, not so much, just really trying to utilize it as work session to talk about some of the potential challenges. And I guess, like I said, talk through some of those with really the only pointed question is what that legality of government authority even lies in there.
well, very rarely would we want as a city to put ourselves in a position to be a guinea pig for new legislation without understanding what other cities who have tried it have already experienced. There have been lawsuits that have been filed against cities who have passed source of income legislation. Probably the lawsuit that has gone the furthest is a lawsuit down in Texas. And the apartment owners lost that lawsuit. In fact, every lawsuit that's been filed against this kind of legislation has gone in favor of the local government who passed that legislation. Now, that's not to say that will always be the case. There's risk anytime you pass something that you're going to get sued, and there's always risk when you get sued that you're going to lose. So I certainly couldn't make that guarantee, and there's no Ohio court that has considered any such litigation involving source of income legislation. But as of today, all indications from the precedent that I've reviewed would be that there is no legal issue if we pass it.
And I'm not, being sued is a something governments have to deal with. It's something small business and large business have to deal with. We know there's always that risk. So it's certainly not be all end all to making any decision. But it seems strange to me as a council member saying we are going to tell any business that you have to enter into another contract. It does seem strange to me, but again, I'm not an attorney, so that's why I certainly wanted to pose that question to what those legalities are. And obviously you and your team would be the ones to defend that. And I think if this moves forward, I'd be interested to see what Attorney Hatsapatino, what his group would go, would they pursue something with this? I don't know, and I'm not hoping that, but I still have a lot of reservations about it. But again, it just seems, even as Mr. Benner said, a bit heavy-handed in some ways. So just some other food for thought and some concerns. But thank you for sharing about the lawsuit and the Texas lawsuit, and some of those things are very compelling for us to learn on. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from council? Okay.
I have
Okay, yes.
a question. It's more about what Mr. Benner said about being forced to change his lease agreement that he's used for 15 years. That he mentioned that with this legislation that he would have to change his lease agreement and basically use whatever what HUD requires him to do. Is that factual?
That directed at me, Councilmember Baker.
Oh, sure. Or anybody can answer it. I've just wanted to make sure that, if this legislation passed, that, he's not forced, or any landlord is not forced to change certain things.
What I would say to that, and again, without getting into the policy question here, because that is a council decision. But from a legal standpoint, most of what is already in that contract from a HUD perspective is something that landlords are already required to do, which is to provide a habitable unit, to follow state and federal regulations with respect to tenant and landlord relationships. It would be Now, while some private landlord-tenant leases will not necessarily incorporate all those laws or all those provisions, they are still required to follow those laws, and those provisions will be implied.
Yes.
Attorney Shook, is it possible that maybe your office could provide a, for lack of a better word, a stock lease agreement that would be in compliance with this potential city code?
Could we provide one? I would not want to do that because I don't want to be in a position where the city is now acting in a private capacity and advising private landlords and tenants in drafting those kinds of agreements.
Okay.
Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and this ordinance will be brought back to committee. Okay. An ordinance to establish Chapter 701 Landlord-Tenant Relationships of the Codified Ordinance of the City of Reynoldsburg. Attorney Shook, will you comment on this legislation?
Yes, thank you. This, much like the last item of legislation, has remained unchanged. Again, hopefully council's had an opportunity to digest the information that was presented at the last meeting, and the purpose here tonight for this work session is to determine if this is something that council wants to continue to pursue, and if so, if there are any changes that you would like to make.
Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
So, yeah.
Yes.
All right. So my question, I had a question before, but I just want to reserve this until the last one here. It was very clear from the two debates, from the debate last week, our last council meeting, both the sides we got to understand. So when the voucher comes, just want to making clear, if the person comes with a voucher, does the apartment owner or the renter, do they have to reduce the price, or it's just they will go with the market price? Is there anything compromising with the price?
No.
Just the market price, whatever. The concern here is not the market price, just the, is that right?
Correct. I mean, we're getting in, I mean, they can't change, they cannot, they would not be required to charge a voucher holder less than any other applicant. They can still charge what they think they can charge to rent out their units. And that's really more of a market question because there probably aren't too many landlords out there that are artificially charging less rent than they could already charge. Most already charge what they think they can get.
Are there additional questions or comments from the committee? From council? Okay, with that, yes, Councilmember Baker.
Oh, I just wanted to make clarification that Attorney H, as I will call him too, because I know I will butcher his last name, said that his association is okay with it as long as the tenant is responsible for providing the renter's insurance. I'm sorry, and I went back over this legislation just to make sure the I's were crossed and or I's were dotted and T's were crossed. It does mention in there that the tenant, if the tenant shows proof, not that the landlord is responsible for providing the insurance. So I just wanted to make that clarification because I know there was a question or he had mentioned that. So we'll be on the responsible of the tenant to show proof to the landlord that they have the renter's insurance up to whatever the security deposit requires, and that they maintain it from when they sign that piece of paper to move in to when they move out. So
Any questions or comments from council? Okay, well, with that, this ordinance will be brought back to the committee.
Just a point of clarification, Madam Chairperson, is this something that, with both of these items of legislation, the amendment to Chapter 503 and the potential creation of Chapter 701, is this something that the sponsors of those items of legislation do in fact want to bring back to council for a first read, either at the next meeting or at an undetermined meeting in the future?
I will defer to the sponsor of this legislation.
So, yes, so thank you, Madam Council Lawson Rowe. Regarding the Chapter 503, I would like to bring that back for the next council meeting for a first read.
I'm sorry. For mine, I would like to go ahead and bring it back for the first read. I'm sure if there's anything that pops up between now and then, it can be amended at the first read or even at the second read, or if we get to a third read there too. So seeing how there hasn't really been any concerns or questions as of so far, so I will go ahead and like this to stand for its first read at the next meeting.
Is that satisfactory, Attorney Shook?
Yes, that gives me exactly the guidance that we need going forward to see how we want to proceed. Certainly doesn't commit council to anything with respect to the legislation, but did want to make sure that if we're going to put this on for a first read, that that's something that the sponsors wanted to do after obtaining as much information as we've obtained at this point. And certainly that doesn't stop the information gathering. It doesn't stop listening to arguments for and against, or even for any potential changes in the future.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Shook. Moving on, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to purchase body cameras, corresponding equipment, and licenses for the police department, waive competitive bidding, and declaring an emergency. Chief Baker, would you like to comment on this legislation, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman, members of the committee. This is in addition to our current body-worn camera program. As you know, in 2020, we also had legislation in front of you for BWC items. That legislation was included near the end of the year because of the pandemic. So we're just starting this new program with a new vendor, WatchGuard. It is the latest technology that's available. As we discussed during budget time, technology has really improved in the area of body-worn cameras. This system is the latest and greatest. It will allow recording at all time, which is important not only to our officers, but to the community. If you've been following current events, you know one of the major issues with body-worn cameras is that the old technology had to be manually activated. There's all kinds of problems with that. Sometimes the cameras don't work. Sometimes the officers think they push the button to manually turn them on and they don't operate. This system will allow recording at all time. That all-time recording is only going to be available in the system for a short amount of time, and then it'll be written over. However, the officer also can manually activate these new cameras, which will create a recording in our system that'll last a greater period of time. So this new system, these new cameras are going to alleviate a lot of the questions that the community had with older technology or concerns. It'll increase our number of body-worn cameras on this new system to 40 body-worn cameras. And this is a program that will be ongoing. So body-worn camera systems and programs, these costs most likely will not go away. So this will be a yearly request with replacement and increasing this system. I'm ready for any questions.
Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Councilmember Cotner.
Several different things to try to clarify. Chief, you said this is for 40 units, and that leaves us kind of where in terms of the gap with what we need still.
So last year, we actually bought 25 cameras, which was under the 2020 purchase. We have recently received them. WatchGuard will have a person here in March to get that system going. This is an additional 15 cameras. So that'll give us 40 total body worn cameras in the system. One of the other advantages of WatchGuard is these body worn cameras are interchangeable between officers. So when they pick one up off the dock, they will log in their credentials and it'll assign them to that officer. So they're interchangeable between officers. So you don't necessarily need 68 cameras. We need enough that we can dock them, they can upload into the system, the battery can recharge, and then they can be used by another officer. So right now I feel comfortable with 40 to start off to see what exactly we need. I certainly don't want to buy more than what we need. I want to be fiscally responsible with the taxpayers' money. So I feel comfortable with the 40 we have now. Once we get this system into operation, we may see that they're not charging as fast as we like. They're not uploading as fast as we like, and we may need to consider buying more in the future. These cameras also have a use life of about 3 to 5 years. So just because we buy these cameras today doesn't mean in 10 years we're going to be using these same cameras. So I just want you to be aware that once we go down this road, and it's no different than what we're already doing, these cameras do have a shelf life of 3 to 5 years. So it's going to be an ongoing cost. Another good feature on this camera is this camera is the first one with a replaceable battery. So the old cameras that we've used, that other agencies have used, the batteries have been internal. So once that battery goes bad or it's not able to recharge, that entire body worn camera is done. With these, you just swap out the battery, kind of the way our portable radios work, and that camera is still workable. It's still useful to use.
Okay. So we'll essentially have them on all officers at all times.
So they will be on officers that are in uniform in the public.
Okay.
So there's some assignments that the technology is not quite there yet. You can't have an undercover officer,
of course,
with the big camera on, because these cameras are still about 4x4 squares. They'd be noticeable. But our expectation is if you're in uniform and in the public, you will have a body camera on. Okay.
And so that leads me to another question. And then I also have another that I want to confirm to with Attorney Shook, but in uniform, cameras with you, cameras on, is the policy in place and is the union agreement set as such that these are worn at all times and are operational at all times? Are there any steps that need to be taken to be positive that these are used as we want to see them used at all times? I think, again, this is a strong benefit for community members to know what's happening. And I think it's a great resource for our officers to protect themselves and show how we're interacting and serving the community and protecting the community too. So this is not directed at, I want to show that our officer did something wrong. This is to really make sure that the protection is there on both ends. I think these are a great tool to utilize. So I want to make sure that if there's something further needs strengthened, are we set like we need to be?
Yeah, so overwhelmingly, these cameras have actually shown our officers are doing the right thing, even when faced with accusations. So they have been well received by our officers. They really don't feel comfortable operating without body-worn cameras. We have maintained the right to develop policy under management rights. So this is nothing that we have negotiated with the union, which has been very helpful for us, because when we've needed to make adjustments or changes to our policy, what we do is we give the membership notice of that change, and then we change the policy. Again, with technology changes, it's very necessary to have that flexibility to be able to change policy, or a current event happens and what we thought was a good idea yesterday doesn't seem like a good idea today. So we have maintained that right through our past negotiations with the union to keep that as a management right. And I'm not aware of us engaging in any bargaining on this issue, but I'll defer to Attorney Shook.
Okay. So Attorney Shook, if you have a comment on that, great, but I'm going to also lead into the question that I had for you about this is, Chief talked about that the tapes essentially are short-lived until they're saved. What's the policy really look like in terms of public records and in terms of retention policy and holding on to these? What do we have to do? Because I know when we've talked about these for years past, before things changed as much, that was a concern, and where they were stored and kept. And so what does this look like now for the city with this?
Yeah, so we actually, it was probably 2 Records Commission meetings ago, had considered a shorter time period for records retention on these videos. You know, the policy generally is that if an officer determines that a body-worn camera video is going to be useful after an interaction or an incident, that they're certainly going to retain that video. Additionally, if we have a case where we believe that body-worn camera video will be useful for us, let's say, you know, I don't know, disorderly conduct, we want to see the video, we'll contact the police department right away to preserve that video and have that sent over to us. Right now, you know, as the chief indicated, you know, we have a lot of inconsistencies with the software that's been provided to us. I know we mentioned this last time when we came to council for the first appropriation and contract for WatchGuard body cameras. But the current body cameras that our officers are using, we just simply cannot rely on them being operational for as long as they need to be, and being downloaded in the timely fashion that they need to be downloaded and accurately. I can tell you that gives us nightmares, because we don't want to have a situation where that's an incident where we absolutely have to have that video, and the reason we don't have it is because of the technology. So, you know, that is something that we have worked with that company on, and we are hopeful to get some type of significant refund on that previous purchase.
Okay. One other comment you made in there that just waves a little caution flag. You said if the officer feels that video would be pertinent, I would, you know, circumstances arise where what seems to be a routine traffic stop, you know, the next morning turns out that someone had an issue, problem, complaint. So again, is there a short span that these are held until deletion, or does the officer choose when it gets held and saved, or what's that process look like?
Short answer, that would not be deleted, but I'll defer to the chief on that.
Yeah, so again, we're talking about some different technologies with this new system. Kind of the easiest way to understand it, under the old system, you had to manually turn that camera on. It's from a button. And once you turn that on, it will start recording. And once it starts doing that, at a minimum, it's going to stay in the system for 30 days when you manually activate that camera. Now, if the recording is involved in a criminal case, we can now mark that video and retain it for a longer period of time. The issue with body cameras in the past is that they would not record unless you manually turn them on. So you had to press a button, it actually had to activate, and then it would start recording. With this new technology, the term that the company uses, they call it ghost recording. So no matter what, that camera is going to be recording 24 hours a day, as long as it's turned on, but not manually recording. Now that just stays on a local server, and that ghost recording will manually overwrite. It acts no different than like the video cameras in our building. So once the DVR kind of fills up, if that's not tagged, that recording will overwrite. It's not capturing anything that's been manually recorded. Why that is a benefit, and we can take the latest Columbus incident as an example. That recording, that whole event would have been able to been captured at a later date by the administration. But it's short-lived because the officer didn't actually depress the button. So the problem with the old technology is you had to press that button for it to capture a recording. This system will work just like a building security camera. It'll keep it locally. And if it's not tagged for any reason, or the camera is not manually activated, after a short period of time, it'll overwrite. But if we have a critical incident, we have a report of misconduct, if it's reported right away, we'll know the critical incident happened. We'll be able to pull that no matter what. But if the critical misconduct is reported right away, we can also go back and capture that, even if the officer did not manually activate that camera. So it is a significant improvement in technology in this area. Did that make it clear?
It's more information. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think this is, great education to share what's out there and how this can help the officers. So yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Chief Baker, I had a couple questions, and I appreciate the robust dialogue because we know how sensitive this subject is to the safety of our officers as well as the broader community. And you've already kind of touched on some of them in terms of how is this different, and you shared about the interchangeable officers and the replacement batteries, new technology, ghost recordings. Are there any other pros to this? And then my second question is the cameras that we have now, is this compatible or can it be upgraded to what we're going to have so that we're all on an equal playing field when our officers are out in the community?
Yeah, so thank you. Those are great questions, and they're very important. So the new system is from a vendor called WatchGuard, and our old cameras are through a vendor called Custom. So the new systems, when we buy a cruiser cam, that's a camera that goes inside the cruiser, it is bundled with a body-worn camera. So that system is integrated, it meshes together. It'll basically give you more camera angles of the event that's taking place. With our old in-car cameras through Custom, we have some really old systems, and some of them are what's called SD. That's the level of definition below HD, and they're really bad when you're used to watching HD now. Through our last 2020 purchase, when we made that purchase, we bought 6 cruiser bundles. And what we did was we replaced all the SD cameras that were through Custom. So those are all gone. Through this newest purchase, we are buying 12 standalone body-worn cameras and 3 cruiser bundles. So 3 more cruiser cameras, 3 more BWCs, and those will be an integrated system. So once we buy these body-worn cameras, every officer will be wearing a WatchGuard body-worn camera. However, a few of the in-car cameras will still be Custom cameras. Really, the only disadvantage of that at this time is we will now have 2 different software platforms and using a different vendor. At this time, with the expense of body-worn camera bundles, it doesn't make sense to replace HD custom cameras in older cars that are likely to get cycled out in the next few years. So the advantage is just not there to justify the cost in doing that. So as this program goes forward, when we replace those cruisers, we will then replace that old camera system, that old custom system with WatchGuard systems. So I think we'll be okay. If I didn't feel comfortable with the older custom in-car cameras, I would be coming to you for replacement. But I do feel comfortable. I think it's the most fiscally responsible way to replace these systems, and we'll still have the transparency that we need.
Okay, and then one last question, Chief, because we know that Reynoldsburg officers are second to none, and we want Reynoldsburg Police Department to be the leader in Central Ohio. Are there other surrounding municipalities that are using this platform that we're, the WatchGuard platform that we're taking on?
Yes, so POW is using the WatchGuard system. Whitehall is using the WatchGuard system, although they have a little older technology, but as their replacement plan is put in place, they will go with the newer technology. Columbus also uses WatchGuard, but they use an older technology. So WatchGuard systems have been shown to be durable. They've been reliable, but now the technology is so much better that we're really going to be ahead of the game here. Grandview Heights is also implementing a brand new body-worn camera program. They are going to WatchGuard. The same with Upper Arlington, what I'm told is also going to this new technology. Really, they are ahead of the game in the BWC technology at this time.
Okay.
It is the best system. I'm very grateful that council is willing to invest in these systems. It is worth the money.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any other? Yes, Councilmember Strickland.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you, Chief Baker, for that explanation. I just want to make sure that I'm clear that I believe back in 2018, that was the first time I believe that we had these body cameras. Were there any issues at that time that you can even think of or heard of about even, the FOP, if FOP would have the issue moving forward with the newer body cams?
Yeah, we had some discussions with the FOP regarding body cams. Again, it was kind of a newer technology. They weren't used to wearing a camera around all the time. A lot of the members, there's a lot of mistrust of the administration, mistrust of politicians, everything around it. Those have since kind of faded away once officers started wearing them. The studies will show not only do police act better when they're wearing cameras, but the public acts better when the officers are wearing cameras. So it's really been mutually beneficial in reducing the amount of conflict, I believe, from what I've seen. People just seem to behave better when they're on camera. So we did have some discussions with our policy. They had some input. They wanted us to adopt some other policies. We went back and forth. At the end of the day, we decided to stay with what we wanted to do. They asked us to negotiate that issue. We declined, and they did not push forward on that issue. So we kept that, again, as a management right, which gives us the flexibility based upon what's occurring in society and what's occurring with body-worn camera technology. So I'm really glad, actually, the city administration at the time and the person that negotiates our contracts took that stance and let us retain that management right.
Perfect, thank you. And as you stated before, we do have the best officers here, right, in Central Ohio. So we want to make sure that we give them the best equipment that's out there to not to protect them, but also our community. So thank you again, Chief Baker.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Salvati.
Thank you. So I wanted to selfishly take this opportunity. So first of all, great questions from all my fellow council members. I don't really have a question. I support this technology, but I also wanted to just say selfishly that, there's a lot of stuff in the news about these cameras catching police officers doing bad things or even not doing bad things when somebody accuses them of doing a bad thing. But I want to state that they often also capture police officers doing great things. And I want to thank, I don't know if it's the chief or somebody he has assigned, but they've been doing a really, really great job with the social media and promoting themselves. And I take great pleasure in sharing that stuff. And it's, there's a lot of people in Reynoldsburg that are proud of the police and sharing stories like that. I don't know, it makes my day every time you guys post it, and you've been doing a great job doing so. So those cameras do capture really great things too. So I just wanted to say that, and I figured this was a good opportunity to do it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Baker.
Chief, you mentioned that you will eventually have 2 different camera systems because some are installed in cruisers that probably are going to get phased out here very soon. When those finally get phased out, those the data from those cameras, will you still have access to that data even though you're getting rid of that those cameras from that particular vendor?
Yeah, so we will have that data as required by retention. A lot of times in criminal cases also, depending on the case, we always have the ability to download that data, whether it be on a disk or a drive, to take it off that software platform. So we will have that available consistent with the retention period.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to mention that you and the Reynoldsburg Police Department is doing a great job. I just want to reiterate what my colleagues have already said. So just keep up the great work, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Councilmember Pacquiao.
Thank you, Chief. I don't have a question. I just want to make a statement here. And the technology is changing, so I think we have to face away the old one. And I think the number we are doing the smaller by smaller, I think that's the right thing to do. And I think definitely we need to go for the new technology, because I don't think that next 2 years, this thing will be good enough. We have to get rid of this, get new one, and move forward from there. I think we're doing the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Chief, I just want to piggyback on what my council colleagues, Councilmember Salvati shared, all the great work and the social media. And I'd like to just take a note of personal privilege to give our community officers a shout out. Officer King and Officer Marshall, they're everywhere, and they have built so many relationships with the community. So I just wanted to shout them out. So if there is no further discussion from council, I move that we forward this ordinance to council for first read. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Pacquiao. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Member Pacquiao? Excuse me? Any opposed? The motion carries. This ordinance will be forwarded to council for a first read. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to purchase 3 police cruisers and a transport van for the police department, waive competitive bidding, and declaring an emergency. Chief Baker?
Yeah, so these items are state bid items. They are replacement items for older cruisers in our fleet. We will be replacing looks like an 11-year-old vehicle with 122,000 miles and a 6-year-old vehicle with 145,000 miles, and a transport van that is 13 years old and it has 110,000 miles. So we will be cycling those vehicles out and using these as replacements. I have one thing to add, if I may, Madam Chairwoman. We do have an option here, and the good thing is we can fit it within our budget because the overage we build in. But I do feel comfortable providing the option to council to move to a hybrid vehicle. Obviously, you know the benefits of a hybrid vehicle. A lot of times our vehicles, our cruisers are idling, which can cause an issue with gas mileage, environmental issues, maintenance issues. So hybrid vehicles came into the police market a couple years ago. I think that they've got all the bugs worked out on them. So I wouldn't have recommended this 2 years ago or even last year. But the information we've gotten back on the newer vehicles is pretty good. The most important thing, I want to give you the cost of a hybrid engine. So it comes on the same platform. A hybrid engine in a police vehicle will run about $3,400 a vehicle more. Again, I feel comfortable with the overage we built in. We're not asking for any more money. I just want to give this as an option to you. I got some information back from the Westerville Police Department. They have been using hybrids this year, and their data shows that they are getting 8 miles more a gallon with the hybrid engine. That may not sound like much, but if you calculate what we drive a year at $2.25 a gallon, that's a saving of $1,300 a year for each vehicle. So as you can see, without even considering environmental benefits, maintenance costs, which should be lower, the gas savings alone, the hybrid engine will pay for itself in 3 years. Now, we typically keep these vehicles for about 5 to 6 years, depending on the mileage, depending on the wear and tear, depending on the maintenance costs. So I just wanted to put that out there for discussion if that's a direction we want to go. Again, no increase to the budget. We have enough in there built in through our overage that I feel comfortable with the estimates that we got, that we can make it fit under the current budget and move to a hybrid engine.
Are there any questions or comments from the committee on this legislation? Pro Temp Bryant?
Thank you, Chair Lawson Rowe. Mayor, do you want to speak maybe a little bit about the upcoming relationship with Clean Fuels Ohio?
Of course. I obviously, at the behest of a couple of council members, and one of the initiatives this year that I'll get into more detail with at the state of the city is some green initiatives. And this one right here is number one. I had spoken with the chief really even earlier last year about what can we do to deal with some of the wear and tear on our automobiles and some of the cost issues with it. And I learned a lot about how the police are, the cars, how they operate, and where the issue is, you can go with certain cars or certain gadgets that try to keep the computer power on while the car is turned off. But there are significant issues with that. And this one is kind of solving the best of both worlds. Clean Ohio is one of those organizations that's going to help kind of launch what we call the Green Tomato Initiative, the ability for the city to become a sustainable city in all manner of speaking, including obviously specifically with the automobiles, but other things as well. And the partnership between us and this organization that is working with us, in addition to some of our council members, is going to bear fruit and get us closer to that sustainability guidelines that we aim for.
Are there any other comments from the committee or council? Okay.
Just would like to make sure that when we do move ahead, that we do move ahead with the hybrid version of the vehicles. I don't know if that's something that has to be stated explicitly in any motion, but I just wanted to make sure.
Okay. I move we forward this ordinance to council for first reading. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Pacquiao. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. This ordinance will be forwarded to council for first reading. As there's no further business for the Public Safety, Law, and Court Committee, I return this meeting to you, Madam Pro Temp Bryant.
Thank you, Chair Lawson Rowe. And next item is the Public Service and Transportation Committee. Councilmember Strickland.
Thank you. This is the Public Service and Transportation Committee meeting for February the 8th, 2021. Members in attendance are Councilmember Cotner, Councilmember Lawson Rowe, Councilmember Pacquiao, myself, and President Pro Temp Bryant. The first item on the agenda, an ordinance creating Chapter 1397 rental property registration to the Reynoldsburg Code of Ordinance to provide for the registration of residential rental housing located within the boundaries of the city of Reynoldsburg. This ordinance is being discussed as a work session only. Attorney Shook, would you like to make a few comments?
Yes, thank you, Councilwoman Strickland. It seems like we've had, I don't know how many work sessions on any form of this particular legislation. Unlike the ordinances that were presented earlier, there have been some changes to this particular ordinance since the work session at the last meeting. The most significant change was to carve out an exception for any rental dwelling unit that is already registered with a county under Chapter 5323 of the Ohio Revised Code, and where they have an agent who is designated for service within 25 miles of the limits of the city of Reynoldsburg. As has been discussed before, under the Ohio Revised Code, for large counties such as Franklin County, rental properties are already required to register. And that is a valuable tool for us. We are able to identify the agents who can receive service of process for code violations, for mayor's court citations, or environmental court citations. And that has value. But unfortunately, not all properties are registered with the county. And even when they are, their agents are not necessarily located within a reasonable proximity of the city. None of the rental properties in Licking County are registered, and none of the rental properties in Fairfield County are registered. As any of our code officers can tell you, it can be very difficult when dealing with some of these properties when we have no one else to serve but their statutory agent. And then we have difficulty with them receiving proper notice for actual notice. This ordinance would give us the ability to be able to identify those individuals easier, quicker, and get them service of process in a more efficient manner. And especially with this change, I think that eliminates some of the duplicative nature of having someone who's already registered with the county registered with the city.
Thank you, Attorney Shook. Are there any questions or comments from the committee on this legislation? I'm sorry, regarding this legislation?
Could I?
Yes, Councilmember Cotner.
Attorney Shook, you said that no properties in Licking County or Fairfield County are registered with those county auditors. Is that correct?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
That is only for counties with a large population like Franklin County. The state law does not require those properties to register with the smaller counties.
Okay. I'll have to, yeah, that's why we have an attorney, obviously. I'll have to reread, but I thought Ohio law said everyone had to register with their county auditor, but it's only counties that are large. What's the number then that population wise? I mean, because Licking and Fairfield it's not like they're small counties.
No. It's 500,000.
Okay. So if a county's over 500,000, that's when the law says they have to register. So those counties.
I can't tell you why the law says that. It just says.
It seems kind of arbitrary, doesn't it? Okay. So we don't have any of them registered. So, I think that's a good change that's included in here to, carve out, again, it seems, doesn't make a lot of sense to have to re-register, you've already done something at Franklin to have to do it again. So I think that's a good adjustment. And again, if Licking and Fairfield have none, then, that makes sense to make sure we have those contacts and those resources. So again, good adjustment and good way to try to clean up some of these others.
Thank you, Councilmember Cotner. Are there any other questions from the committee? Any from council? All right, this ordinance will be brought back to the Public Service and Transportation Committee for further discussion. Thank you. Item number 2, an ordinance from the Reynoldsburg City Council reaffirming support for the Ohio Department of Transportation, ODOT, project to resurface US Route 40 on other related improvements in Licking County, appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. This ordinance is being requested as a single read emergency measure. Director Dorman, can you say a couple things about this legislation?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So actually, councils, this was brought up recently because ODOT had contacted us asking for some copies of the legislation that was passed. In 2019, City Council actually passed an ordinance very similar to this, other than the numbers were different. However, the money was not actually appropriated. It was just a commitment of support and a rough estimate of cost. Now that ODOT has actually finalized the project and are in the process of bidding it out and getting ready to hopefully award to a contractor, the numbers have they did increase. Now these numbers we already knew about and we had planned for in our CIP budget for 2020. So we are fine financially with this money. However, by passing this ordinance, we are actually appropriating the funds, and that's something that ODOT requires. All of ODOT's legislation requires the local agency to put the money up front. They do not invoice. They ask you to basically pay for the project in advance. So I think we're going to have another ordinance too regarding the Franklin County portion, which basically says the same thing. But basically it's more of a, I wouldn't say a cleanup, but it's basically now we know what the true numbers are, and we're basically just reaffirming our commitment and the cost.
Great, thank you, Director Dorman. Are there any questions or comments from the committee on this legislation? Any from council? I move we forward this ordinance to council as a single read emergency measure. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Lawson Rowe. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This ordinance will be forwarded to council as a single read emergency measures. Item number 3, an ordinance from the Reynoldsburg City Council reaffirming support for the Ohio Department of Transportation, ODOT, project to resurface US Route 40 and other related improvements in Franklin County, appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. Director Dorman.
Yes, same thing. Basically, ODOT is in the process currently, you can tell, of advertising these projects and hopefully getting a contractor on board. I think council's obviously pretty up to speed on this project. The goal was to get all of Main Street paved. Originally, ODOT was going to do, I think, a portion, I believe it was the Licking County portion last year, but knowing we're going to be doing the work on Main Street, we asked them to defer that for 1 year, which they did. So now we will basically be doing all of Main Street. We will definitely be communicating with council on how that'll work. I'm assuming they're probably going to do some nighttime paving. We probably direct them to do that, so it won't impact traffic or affect businesses as much during the day. But once again, it's just a reaffirming our commitment and the actual cost of the project.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the committee on this legislation? From council? I move we forward this ordinance to council for a first reading. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Pacquiao. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This ordinance will be forwarded to council for a first read. Item number 4, an ordinance to accept an unrecorded deed of sanitary sewer easement and temporary construction easement 0.057 acres from Matthew L. Bramer and Mark A. Bramer and declaring an emergency. This ordinance is being requested as a single read emergency measures. Attorney Shook, would you like to say a couple things?
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman Strickland. And I know how much council very dislikes emergency legislation and especially one read legislation. The next several items that are going to come before this committee are sanitary sewer and temporary construction easements on Wagner Road for the construction of a sanitary sewer system that will connect the new MI Homes development. MI Homes has negotiated the acquisition of these particular easements and they have paid for them. It's no cost to the city and the construction will be undertaken by MI Homes as well. Construction begins next Monday. So a lot of the negotiation that went on between MI and the property owners went on until the very last minute. And that's why it didn't get presented to you until tonight. In addition, the city is currently negotiating with those property owners additional acquisition of right-of-way so that in the future, when the city is able to widen Wagner Road, we will have the right-of-way that we need. We had hoped to present all of that at the same time. It just, the timing didn't work out that way. So again, I apologize for presenting an emergency legislation to you, especially one that's a one read, but in this particular case, I hope that council will find that it's appropriate.
Thank you, Attorney Shook. Are there any questions or comments from the committee on this legislation? From council? I move we forward this ordinance to council as a single read emergency measure. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Council Member Lawson Rowe. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? A motion carries. This ordinance will be forwarded to council as a single read emergency measures. Item number 5, an ordinance to accept an unrecorded deed of sanitary sewer easement and temporary construction easement on 0.178 acres from Stephen Hatton and Tammy Williams and declaring an emergency. This ordinance is being requested as a single read emergency measure. Attorney Shook.
Same presentation as the last time.
All right. Is there any additional questions or comments? All right, I move we forward this ordinance to council as a single read emergency measures. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Council Member Lawson Rowe. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. This ordinance will be forwarded to council as a single read emergency measures. Item number 6, an ordinance to accept an unrecorded deed of sanitary sewer easement and temporary construction easement on 0.103 acres from Robert J. Holmowski and Margaret M. Holmowski and declaring an emergency. This ordinance is being requested as a single read emergency measures. Attorney Shook.
Same presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Attorney Shook from the committee or from council? I move we forward this ordinance to council as a single read emergency measure. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Council Member Papriel. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion carries. This ordinance will be forwarded to council as a single read emergency. Item number 7, an ordinance to accept an unrecorded deed of sanitary sewer easement and temporary construction easement on 0.031 acres from the Roderick C. Griffin Trust and declaring an emergency. This ordinance is being requested as a single read emergency measure. Attorney Shook.
Same presentation.
Are there any questions or comments from the council or council members? Committee? All right. I move we forward this ordinance to council as a single read emergency. Is there a second?
Second.
second by Councilmember Lawson Rowe. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Motion carries. This ordinance will be forwarded to council as a single read emergency measures. Item number 8, a ordinance to accept an unrecorded deed of sanitary sewer easement and temporary construction easement 0.045 acres from Roderick C. Griffin Trust, the Maryland Jean Griffin, Irrevocable Trust, Roderick C. Griffin, Kitten G. Griffin, and Laura J. Sample, and declaring an emergency. This ordinance is being requested as a single read emergency. Attorney Shook.
Thank you, Chairwoman Strickland. That shall be the same presentation.
Thank you. Just want to get it on record here. Are there any other questions or comments for the committee, from the committee, or on this legislation? From council? All right, I move we forward this ordinance to council as a single read emergency measure. Is there a second? I'm sorry. Yes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Pacquiao. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carries. This ordinance will be forwarded to council as a single read emergency measure. As there is no further business for the Public Service and Transportation Committee, I return the meeting back to you, Madam President Pro Tem Bryant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Strickland. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda for emergency adoption. Items 11A through I are part of a consent agenda. These ordinances stand for emergency adoption. Unless someone wants to remove an item for further discussion, council will move forward with voting on these ordinances. If no one speaks, move forward. If questions, request that item be removed from the consent agenda. Would the clerk please read items 11A through I?
Item A, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to purchase a Ford truck and related equipment for the street department, appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. B, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to purchase an F-350 Ford truck and related equipment for the water and sewer department, appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. C, an ordinance from the Reynoldsburg City Council reaffirming support for the Ohio Department of Transportation project to resurface US Route 40 and other related improvements in Licking County, appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. D, an ordinance to accept an unrecorded deed of sanitary sewer easement and temporary construction easement .057 acres from Matthew L. Bramer and Mark A. Bramer and declaring an emergency. E, an ordinance to accept an unrecorded deed of sanitary sewer easement and temporary construction easement .101 acres from Robert J. Holomuski and Margaret M. Holomuski and declaring an emergency. F, an ordinance to accept an unrecorded deed of sanitary sewer easement and temporary construction easement .178 acres from Stephen Hatton and Tammy Williams and declaring an emergency. G, an ordinance to accept an unrecorded deed of sanitary sewer easement and temporary construction easement .031 acres from the Roderick C. Griffin Trust and declaring an emergency. H, an ordinance to accept an unrecorded deed of sanitary sewer easement and temporary construction easement .045 acres from the Roderick C. Griffin Trust, the Maryland Jean Griffin Irrevocable Trust, Roderick C. Griffin, Kenton G. Griffin, and Laurel J. Sample and declaring an emergency. And I, an ordinance to approve payment of service performed in prior year and declaring an emergency.
We have item I.
That was the an ordinance to approve payment of services performed in prior year.
Okay, sorry. May I have a motion to approve these ordinances? Motion made by Councilmember Baker. Do we have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Strickland. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Pecorell,
Aye.
Councilmember Lawson Rowe,
Aye.
Councilmember Cotner,
Aye.
Councilmember Baker,
Aye.
Councilmember Strickland,
Aye.
Councilmember Savati, President Pro Tem Bryant.
Aye.
Madam, the vote was 6-0.
These
No.
ordinance,
Yes, no, 7-0.
yes. These ordinances are approved, 7 affirmative votes, no negative votes. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda for the first reading. Items 10A through D are part of a consent agenda. These ordinances stand for a first reading. Unless someone wants to remove an item for further discussion, a council will move these 4 items forward for a first reading. If no one speaks, move forward. If questions, request that item be removed from the consent agenda. Would the clerk please read items 10A through D?
A, an ordinance to waive the provisions of section 971.16 of the City of Reynoldsburg codified ordinances for the 2021 for various Reynoldsburg Parks and Recreation events. B, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to purchase body cameras, corresponding equipment, and licenses for the police department, waive competitive bidding, and declaring an emergency. C, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to purchase 3 police cruisers and a transport van for the police department, waive competitive bidding, and declaring an emergency. D, an ordinance from the Reynoldsburg City Council reaffirming support for the Ohio Department of Transportation project to resurface US Route 40 and other related improvements in Franklin County, appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
These ordinances stand for a first reading. Next item is the consent agenda for second reading. Items 13A through D are part of a consent agenda. These ordinances stand for a second reading. Unless someone wants to remove an item for further discussion, council will move these items forward for a second reading. If no one speaks, move forward. If questions, request that item be removed. Would the clerk please read items 13A through D?
A, an ordinance consenting to an annexation of certain real property located on US Route 40 identified as parcel numbers 010-017466-00.000, 010-018030-00.000, and 010-018030-00.001 in Licking County and adopting permanent zoning. B, an ordinance to amend Chapter 795 Adult Entertainment and/or Sexually Oriented Businesses or Clubs of the Codified Ordinances for the City of Reynoldsburg. C, an ordinance authorizing the annual participation in the ODOT road salt purchasing contract. And D, an ordinance to approve the application made by Maplewood Farms LTD to have certain land located within the City of Reynoldsburg, located on Summit Road, permanent parcel number 125-026616-00.000, designated for placement in an agricultural district.
These ordinances will stand for second reading. Next item is the consent agenda for third reading. Items 14A through B is part of consent agenda. These ordinances stand for a further reading or for a third reading and approval. Unless someone wants to remove an item for further discussion, council will move forward with a vote on these ordinances. All right, would the clerk please read items 14A through B?
An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract for the 2021-2022 landscape services contract and appropriating funds. B, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract for the 2021-2022 irrigation service contract and appropriating funds therefore.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve these ordinances?
I moved.
Motion made by Councilmember Pecoriel. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilmember Baker. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Pecoriel,
Aye.
Councilmember Lawson Rowe,
Aye.
Councilmember Cotner,
Aye.
Councilmember Baker,
Aye.
Councilmember Strickland,
Aye.
Councilmember Savati, and President Pro Tem Bryant.
Aye.
That was 7 affirmative votes.
These ordinances are approved, 7 affirmative votes, no negative votes. Next item is other council matters. Does anyone on council have any further items that they would like to discuss?
Yes, Councilman Bryant, I have one thing to say here. So first thing is we are celebrating a Black History Month. Thank you, Councilmember Baker, for bringing the resolution today. And we are in the midst of COVID, every one of us we know, and the vaccine has come. And part of the governor's minority vaccine advisory group, I am one of the members there. And the numbers are when you see the numbers, it's very sad. The people affected by the COVID, when you see by race, the minority communities is very high. And I have numbers for very preliminary numbers from few states, and particularly from Ohio, who got vaccinated. And before I say that percentage or number, all of us, we should try our best to provide the right information to the public. There are many reasons, some kind of information is going to our people. And there are, on top of that, there are a lot of barriers to the minority communities to reach out to these vaccinations, like transportation, and again, availability of the informations, internet, and language barrier, all kind of things are there. And when you see the number in Ohio, when you see percentage of people vaccinated, the black, there are only 2 races divided, black and white, the others are not there. 5% of the black people are vaccinated and 78% are white. And the number of cases, 13% of the black population, 30% of the cases are black and 74% are white. Out of that, and when you see the death, 13% of the black is a death and 83% white. Out of the total population is 12% is black and 82% is white. So when you see the total population versus the number of people who vaccinated, the number of people from the minority communities really low. So I think we as a informed citizen, we have a responsibility to bring out the right information to the public. It is up to the individual to make a choice whether to receive or not. But I got my vaccine. I work for healthcare, and I have to meet with the people all the time. And my dad, he's 99 now, almost close to 99. He's 98. He also received vaccine, and so I'm just worried because I'm getting call from folks that they are finding it difficult to make an appointment because sometime when they call, it's not available. I think all of us, we should try our best to bring right information and make people to make this choice. So I think we are in a very critical position at this time. So just I want to make this note here today.
Thank you, Councilmember Pecoriel. Councilmember Strickland.
Yes, thank you, President Pro Tem Bryant. Thank you, Councilmember Pecoriel, for all that information, that data. It really does paint a picture, right? What's going on. in Ohio. With that being said, I know some of my constituents here in Ward 1 is looking to see about getting the vaccination. Are we going to be doing anything? Can we work with the governor to see how we can bring a temporary hub here to provide a couple of dates, times, location regarding that vaccination here in Reynoldsburg?
Mayor?
Councilwoman Strickland, members of council, as you know, or hope you know, last weekend, the Reynoldsburg High School field house at the Livingston campus was used as a vaccination center for teachers. I believe the numbers reached around 17,000 total vaccinations between the two sites here and in Hilliard. And so obviously the discussion came about is what can we do to work here? We've been working with Franklin County Department of Health. We've reached out to Truro Township and I have had some conversations. The question is not the ability of whether or not we can have anything. The question is just the access to the vaccines right now. So right now, everyone is currently 65 and older is on schedule to get their vaccinations. And then at that point, they're expecting that to take 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how quickly people sign up. And at that point in time, they're going to start making plans to come out here. But needless to say, we are advocating. Obviously, we've had a number of COVID testing sites here. We have a number of facilities that can be used, including Reynoldsburg United Methodist Church, our own senior center, some of our facilities in the school district. So we have a lot of ability here. The question is just when we can get those vaccines. And we are talking to someone every day, whether they like it or not, to convince them that we need to have that site out here in Reynoldsburg.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other comments from council? Councilmember Baker?
Two things. One is keeping with my tradition of thanking everybody who's helping fight against COVID. Keep up the good work. Two, Director Dorman, if you're still on the call, I had a question about the intersection of Bryce and Main Street where the wall used to be, but now has been taken out. Is there plans to put something and replace there instead of just leaving it as is, like maybe some bushes, some flowers when the time comes, you know, just spruce up that corner?
Councilmember Baker, Director Dorman's phone connection dropped. So I don't know if
he could just email me. That's fine. Or Mayor, sound like
I can answer. We're actually looking at a couple of different things. That particular property is for sale. For those of you looking to buy some really good items at clearance level, please do so. I think they're clearing out right now to move into their other location just down the road. We do know that that site is available for sale. So if there's any developers who are still watching, feel free and reach out to that particular thing. But we are also looking at potentially trying to get an appraisal on that corner to maybe potentially straighten out Bryce Road, so you'd have more of a connection. So that way it would be straight across as opposed to the angle that is there. So a couple of those options are on the table right now. Again, it just takes time, a little bit of patience, and hopefully some cooperation from whoever the new user is of that facility.
I appreciate it, Mayor. And Director Dorman, if you hear me, I appreciate you taking down that wall. Everybody knows that a car plowed through it and it just looked bad. And as a gateway into the city, I just want to try to fix up that corner as much as possible.
Okay, any other council or any other comments tonight?
I think Director Bowser wanted to say something.
Oh,
I was just, thank you, Councilwoman Bryant. I was just referencing what Mr. Baker had said. I had our engineering staff actually draft up that. I'm very aware of the issue that's there. Obviously, you know, and I know, and everyone else here knows that it's been hit several times, time and time again. It's a blinding sort of light, and when you are impaired, it makes it even that much more difficult there at the intersection. So the plan, as the mayor had mentioned, it would take a few spots away. Those plans have been submitted, and early communication has been made with the property owner. Obviously, we don't want to do anything currently right now because it's obviously, it's up for sale, and so that could be detrimental. However, our next step is to get an appraised value on it to go ahead and take that right away to extend that. It would take 3 or 4 additional spots. We would just landscape up and around it. but it's very important, especially as we start to redevelop the Bryson Main corner in the Kmart, as I know the mayor is going to mention on Wednesday. It's very important that we also get that side done as well. And then the future behind the new Walgreens, a potential development back there, making sure that they have proper access to Bryce Road and that light. It would also include a left southbound turn lane, which is not currently there. So anybody actually exiting out of the Walgreens sites in order to make a left has to get into the suicide lane, which is what we call that middle lane that's in the middle of Main Street. It's called suicide lane. Not a great name, but also unsafe to get into that way. So the goal would be to have access off of Bryce Road so somebody could go down to the light, heading southbound on Bryce, make a left on Main Street, and feel safe to be able to get there and out. So we're fixing actually several problems by really focusing on the one large problem, which was the wall that basically should have never been there, and obviously the jog that was created when we expanded Bryce Road 15 years ago. So it's certainly being taken a look at. We have spent some engineering dollars to approve of those plans, and we'll continue moving that forward. As soon as we find out the new owner or a redevelopment to get in there, we will make sure that that happens. I think you'll see that over the next couple of years fully come to fruition.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. Any other comments from council? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to the last item on the agenda, which is our upcoming meetings. There is a schedule of upcoming council, BZBA, and Planning Commission meetings. Council anticipates continuing with virtual meetings. Please note that the next council meeting is scheduled for Monday, February 22nd, 2021, beginning at 6:30 p.m. And unless there is any additional business, this meeting is adjourned at 9:17.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good evening.